Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. Today, eco-innovation. You've probably seen the headlines, companies trying to be environmentally responsible, but can they actually make it profitable? That's what we're diving into today. Going through the research, it really struck me how companies are kind of stuck between this rock and a hard place, needing to make money now, but also knowing they got to think long term, right? Invest in a sustainable future.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where things get tricky. It's what we call a strategic dilemma. Companies have budgets, deadlines, they need to see results, but the environment, well, that needs action now, and that often means big investments, long-term thinking. It's tough to balance.
Yeah, and you see it all the time, right? Companies trying to cash in on the green trend, like slap a new label on something, bump up the price. Doesn't always work, does it?
Nope, definitely not. And that's why really understanding eco-innovation is so crucial. It's not about these quick, superficial changes. It's about making real change, creating value for the business while becoming more sustainable. These goals, they're not separate. They can actually work together.
Okay, so how do companies find those wins then? Because it sounds like we're talking pretty big changes here.
Absolutely. It's about changing how they think.
Yeah.
This research, it points to polymathic thinking as a major factor in successful eco-innovation, basically breaking down those walls that exist in companies and looking at things holistically.
So instead of finance being totally separate from sustainability, they start working together, realizing their goals are actually connected.
Exactly. Imagine you get the finance people, the environmental experts, the engineers, even psychologists, all in one room looking at the same problem. You're going to get some innovative solutions that way, solutions that benefit the planet and the bottom line.
Okay, I like it, but can you give me a concrete example? How's this actually playing out?
Sure. Let's say there's a company and they want to lower their carbon footprint. Now, they could just switch to renewable energy, which is great, but with this polymathic thinking, they might also bring in people who understand behavior to figure out how to get their employees to use less energy every day, right? Or logistics experts, optimizing their whole supply chain becomes much more well-rounded.
So, bigger picture thinking, realizing the solution isn't just one thing, but how everything is connected.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that interconnectedness is super important when you think about that tension we talked about before, short-term profits versus long-term sustainability.
That tension, the short term versus long term, it reminds me of something else I read about paradox theory. Sounds complicated.
Not as much as you'd think, really. Basically, it's the idea that instead of these competing demands being like one or the other, companies can actually learn to work with that tension.
So, not about eliminating it, but almost using it, like fuel for innovation.
Exactly. See, these paradoxes, they're not problems to be solved, they're just tensions you got to manage. The research, it talks about two main ways to do this: acceptance and resolution. Acceptance is just acknowledging the paradox exists. Both sides matter.
So, a company saying, look, we need profit, but we also want to reduce our impact. And sometimes, yeah, those clash, and that's okay.
Perfect example. Being honest about the challenge, bringing people along. Now, resolution, that's about actually taking action. Two approaches there: separation and synthesis.
Okay, those are some big words again. What do they actually mean for a business?
Separation, think of it like addressing each side separately, maybe at different times, different parts of the business. So you might go all in on short-term profits in one area, but then heavily invest in long-term sustainability in another. Strategic,
Hedging your bets a little.
you got it. Then there's synthesis. That's where you're really trying to combine both sides of the paradox into one awesome thing. That's where it gets exciting, finding solutions that are both profitable and sustainable. They're not separate anymore.
Sounds ideal, but how do you actually do that? Is there some secret formula?
Well, this is where that polymathic thinking comes back in. Those really innovative solutions, they often come from combining different fields, different ways of thinking. Let's say you've got a company making a physical product, right? They want to be greener and save money.
Okay, I'm with you.
Traditional thinking, you just look at their factory, how they make things. But polymathic, you bring in engineers, sure, but also designers to make the product easier to recycle, maybe even marketing folks, to see if they can sell it as a service instead of just a one-time purchase.
Interesting. So you're thinking about the whole life of the product, finding those win-wins all along the way.
Exactly. And it's not even just having those different people. It's about a company where everyone shares what they know, challenges each other, and thinks outside their little box.
Okay, so polymathic thinking, embracing the paradoxes, all that. But how does it actually work in the real world? What are companies really doing?
Well, the research highlights a couple of really interesting strategies companies are using: buying time and future-proofing demand.
Okay, those sound pretty interesting. Tell me more.
Let's start with buying time. So sometimes, to really push the boundaries of eco-innovation, you need to make big investments up front.
Hmm.
And the market, it might not be ready for that yet, right? So buying time is about finding ways to bridge that gap.
So how do they literally buy time? Like, are we talking huge research grants, things like that?
That's definitely part of it. Government funding, especially for those early technologies that are super risky but could be game changers.
Mm.
But it's also about finding investors who get it, investors who are looking for companies tackling these big sustainability challenges.
So building a safety net, both money and support, so they can focus on the long game, even if it's not profitable right away.
Exactly. Because one of the biggest hurdles for eco-innovation is that, honestly, the numbers don't always add up in the short term. Maybe people aren't ready to pay more for sustainable product, or the infrastructure isn't there to support it. Buying time is about creating the right conditions for those innovations to succeed, even if the world isn't quite there yet.
Makes sense. Playing the long game. Okay, what about this future-proofing demand? What's that all about?
So future-proofing demand is like being able to predict where the market's going and making sure your innovations are what people will want in the future. You got to remember, what consumers want, it's not set in stone. It changes over time, especially as people become more aware of, like climate change and new regulations pop up.
So you're staying one step ahead, seeing those changes coming and being ready for them.
Right. Like think about electric cars. The companies that realized early on that people were worried about pollution, about the planet, they were ready when the demand exploded.
Like they were reading the tea leaves, knew it was coming.
Exactly. And that's where polymathic thinking is super useful. To really get those predictions right, you got to look at so much information, what customers are saying, new technologies, what governments are doing, the economy. It's about putting that puzzle together.
So it's not just about caring about the planet, it's realizing that being sustainable, it's just good business sense.
Absolutely. And that's a powerful message for companies to hear, I think.
It really is. So to wrap things up for our listeners today, eco-innovation, it's not some far-off idea, it's happening now. And it's not just about doing good, it's about doing well in business too.
And the key is, don't be afraid of the complexity, right?
Right.
Break down those barriers, look at things from all angles. That's the beauty of polymathic thinking.
It's about making connections, seeing the bigger picture. And on that note, we'll leave you with this. How can you use this idea, polymathic thinking, in your own work, your own life? What unexpected connections can you make to create positive change? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.